Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to those attending this meeting and also to the viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. Details of the business to be considered today is shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room, and it's also accessible online under the live broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note that you'll be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. For those solely observing in the room today, you may wish to know that the camera is angled away from the public gallery where you are sitting. At the end of the public part of the meeting, when the committee moves to discuss any confidential matters, the live broadcast on YouTube will be cut. A reminder to anyone speaking today that your voice will only be audible online if the microphone is switched on. Now, I have to say that the microphones have given some trouble today in this room, and when you switch them on, they may not go on. So what you have to do is to switch it off and switch it on again. And hopefully the light will light up and we'll have a connection. If it doesn't, we'll see what we can do later, but they're not working as they should. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm does go off, please follow the officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting point. So there are 3 fire exits here, one the door you came in and one at either side of me. Most important now for those in the room, and I'm going to do mine because I didn't do it while I was in the office, please ensure that your mobile phones are switched off or at least put onto silent. I'm just going to do mine now while we wait because that would be terribly embarrassing if it went off. There are residents' feedback forms on the chairs. Can you please complete one of the orange forms? The information on these forms is intended to help us improve the way that we run our meetings. Forms can be completed and left in the room for collection after the meeting or completed and returned by post to the address on the form. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also complete the form online and there's a link below the broadcast. Please ensure that you identify which item you have an interest in, state whether your interest is pecuniary or non-pecuniary, and give the reason that you have an interest. And that's a message to my colleagues. I believe there might be one tonight, and we'll deal with that when we get onto that part of the agenda. The way the committee operates, might seem a little peculiar to those who've never been here before. It's a meeting in public, but not a public meeting. So only the people with speaking rights are those speaking on a petition and the applicant who has then the right of reply. Only persons sitting at the tables will be seen and heard on the website. We have 2 parts to most meetings, and certainly it's 2 parts to this meeting. Part 1 is the general part of the meeting, and Part 2 are matters of enforcement, and these are discussed in private for legal reasons as the courts may be involved. There are Part 2 items on the agenda tonight, and when we move into Part 2, I will make the statement that we are now moving into Part 2, and there will be a pause when we move from Part 1 to Part 2 to allow the room to be cleared, and the video link will be broken at this time. Before we start, let me introduce you to the people who are sitting here who will be making the decisions. Introduce you to the councillors. If we start right at the far end, that's Councillor Brian Stead, Councillor Alan Chapman, Councillor Sharir Ahmed Walana, myself, Councillor David Yarrow, who is the Vice Chairman of the committee, who finds himself chairing the committee tonight, Councillor Mo Kashid, Councillor Peter Money, and Councillor John Morse. I'm very sorry that under the layout of this room, you're only going to be seeing the backs of the councillors rather than their fronts. But, well, I have no comment to make. It's most awkward. Unfortunately, Committee Room 5, where we always meet, is in use at this moment in time. Something big's going off tomorrow. I'm not quite sure what it is. but it's in use. So there is also a problem. The screen is certainly a long way away from me. I think I can just about make it out. I don't know. I hope you can see when the applications are presented on the screen. Now, sitting next to me, we'll go down the line. Starting on the left is James Rogers, who is the head of planning. Neil Fraser, who is the Democratic Services Officer. He's got to keep me in order and make sure that I don't forget anything and that I conduct myself properly. And Jyoti Mehta, who is my legal representative. Meg Harani will be presenting the applications this evening. And Alan Tilley is going to handle any transport problems that may arise during our debating. I think that's it, and we've got most of it over. Now we'll go into a little bit of housekeeping, which is the start of the agenda. Have we any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chairman. Apologies received from Councillor Edwards and Councillor Chandal.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest in matters coming before this meeting? Councillor Kashid.
Councillor, if you wouldn't mind putting
microphone.
The microphone on. Thank you.
Chair, thank you for the introduction. The two items, item 6 and item 8, are in my ward, so I'm declaring non-pecuniary interest.
You've just reminded me, item 12 is in my ward. Councillor Money.
Thanks, Chairman. I've got a non-pecuniary interest for agenda item 17. It's in my ward.
Thank you. Are there any matters that have been notified in advance or urgent? I have none. Thank you.
Chairman.
I now confirm that the items of business marked Part 1 will be considered in public and that the items marked Part 2 will be considered in private. Thank you. And we have to look at the minutes of the 11th of May 2017. Can we have a vote that those minutes are correct?
Move.
Sorry?
I move.
Okay. Seconded? Those in favour? Are you objecting to them? I wasn't present. Ah. Right, if we can move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is address between 40 and 42A and the rear of 42 and 42A Station Road in Hayes. Meg, can you lead us on that?
Thank you, Chairman. The application site is a single-storey mid-terrace property situated on the west side of Station Road. The site is within the primary shopping centre of Hayes Town Centre. The proposal is to change the use of part of the unit from retail use to a takeaway use. The main issue for members to consider is whether the partial loss of the retail use is acceptable. Policy S11 of the Council's local plan seeks to maintain the vitality of shopping areas by maintaining a range of retail units within primary frontages. To this end, the Council would normally seek to retain at least 70% of the frontage within retail use. The most recent shopping survey indicates that the proportion of frontage within this primary shopping area, which is already in retail use, is below the 70% threshold at 56.7%. Therefore, this would normally result in the application being recommended for refusal. However, this unit has been subdivided to form 5 small kiosk-style outlets, and 4 of these are retained in retail use, comprising of 2 gift shops and 2 florists. Within the rearmost element, there's a takeaway use which is operating currently. Given the retention of the majority of the unit in retail use and the small-scale nature of the proposed takeaway use, it's considered that the proposal would not, on balance, erode the retail function and attractiveness of the primary shopping area. The site is located within a town centre, and thus residents in the vicinity of the site already experience some level of noise and disturbance from early morning and late evening uses within the centre. Given the hours of operation proposed for this site and controlled by condition, this particular proposal is not likely to add to the impact. On the basis of what I've said, the application is recommended for approval. If I can just turn members' attention to the addendum, there is a proposal. The applicants did write to us and request an amendment to the condition restricting the hours of use, and cited a number of units within the vicinity which operate at various times in the morning. Your officers have considered this and have recommended that the hours of use are amended slightly to allow opening at 7 o'clock in the morning. If I can just go through the plans and photographs. That shows the location. It is this sort of very small opening here, and then it widens out to the rear. And as I said before, it is subdivided into a small number of kiosks, and the unit that we're considering is this one at the back. These are elevations. There's no changes to the elevations that are proposed. It is this particular unit here, and that's the entrance, and then these are the retail units that are within it, and as you can see right at the back is the takeaway use. All of the other uses are retail uses. The takeaway use does have a number of these small tables that set out in the walkway to the retail unit and to the rear. As I said, given the small-scale nature, the officers consider that the use is acceptable. Thank you, Chairman.
Can I just point out for the record that the agenda sheet shows it as down as refusal, but in fact the actual report itself is shown as approval. Councillor?
Thank you, Chairman. While we're on that subject, also on the agenda page, item 6, it's showing as class A5, whereas on the main page, it's class A3. Is it A3 or A5?
Just clarify, it is an A5 use that is being proposed, a takeaway use. A3 is a restaurant use.
Okay, so the A3 in the report needs to be amended to A5. Thank you. I understand we have a petitioner in support of this, Mr. Jazz O'Brien, and I think Mr. Kenneth Dean is... Yeah, who's actually given the petition? Let me just explain to you the rules of speaking. You get 5 minutes, 4 minutes on green, 1 minute on amber, and when it gets to red, I'll have to stop you. Okay? Go ahead now.
Right. Firstly, sorry about the way I'm dressed. Straight from work. I work on the railways, and I was just commandeered at late notice because Ken had to cancel. Ken, who I met when I go in there for my early morning break, for my 10 o'clock break, having a coffee. It's a handy place to do because you've got a shelf, so you can sit down there and I have a chat with him, or leave while you're having your bits and pieces. Also, I can park my scooter outside if I'm working in Langley or somewhere like that. The location's good. The coffee's really nice, but I get toasted sandwiches. I'm not quite sure what exactly I have to say, so I'm sorry. I only just...
Well, you're speaking in support of what is being offered by that particular cafe, and that I guess how valuable it is to you if you're speaking in support.
Yeah, it would be nice to get something rather than just a toasted sandwich, to be honest. You know, working that's what I feel about it. And there's a nice atmosphere, and there's a good mixture of people in there. A lot of older people use it as well, come in for their coffees. And as I say, you've got a lean-to on the side where you can have a lead of paper and just drink your coffee there before you go out. You can stand along one side opposite the retail units that where the florist and the gift shop I'm not quite sure he's...
Mr. Bright, do you want to say anything as
Oh,
the owner of the
yeah, well, I
business?
could-
Please,
yeah,
just say. You've still got your 5 minutes.
Right, okay. Well, the reason is that we looked at opening something like that. I've lived there all my life since I was born here in 1979. So the elderly now elderly, the people I grew up with, you miss seeing them because everything got developed into retail, mobile phone shops, barber shops, all the bakers and where the elderly or those now in the Hester Centre, they've got nowhere to go. And a lot of the doctors recommend afterwards, obviously after a blood test, to have somewhere to sit down. Disabled access, you can't get into any other places because you can't get those large electric mopeds in. So I thought that'd be a good idea. Now they've started to come in, they use the place just for their coffee mornings. We don't mind just to sit there with a cup of tea and 4 or 5 of them just to have a chit chat, read a book. It's nice to have them there. The florist certainly helped as well. It's just now when it especially gets colder, like some hot food. You know, maybe we could do some eggs and toast and stuff, and that's quite a nice atmosphere. Busier in the mornings and at lunchtimes. It's not turning into a kebab shop or a burger shop. That's not what we do. We've already got plenty of those there anyway. It was just something for the community to add. And obviously we're going to encourage sort of like book clubs and arts and clubs and smaller market stalls, which are similar in the Methodist Church, where you can sort of sell things a couple of hours a day. That's really what we were looking for. The hot food was to add something extra to the menu, you know, when it gets cold. That was the whole reason we put this application through.
Breakfast roll would be nice.
Thank you very much. Any comments to ask? Any questions? Okay. Oh, Councillor Morse.
Yeah, I just want to ask one question. Do you feel adding this food would make more people come in and look at the A1 units? Because that seems to be what you're implying.
To be fair, I think it's helped hand in hand. People certainly need more of those retail. There's definitely no gift shops or florists in there. The florists that are in town, either side of the town, it's just a nice environment. To be fair, the people who are in there like having people sit there and talk to. I think they help hand in hand. I think it's 50-50. Whether one brings the other in, who knows? I mean, if that florist was there for the next 10 years, I'd have to look at the books afterwards and see who helped who. But to be fair, it does bring a lot of people in. Either they look at the florist, and if they're waiting for a bouquet to be made, have a coffee. Same as any other retail that would be in there.
I like it because the older
No,
people...
you've had your time now. Yeah. Any further questions from councillors? No. Councillor.
Yeah, I've just got one concern about the walkways. Can the officers clarify on this one first? The walkway, the communal sitting area, people will be sitting there and drinking tea, coffee, etc. What about if somebody is sitting there, young mother with a pushchair, pram, etc.? Is the walkway wide enough?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, because as you can see from the photograph, there are tables, but they're fairly small tables on either side, and the walkway is wider than a metre at least, so it's sufficiently wide enough for wheelchairs and for pushchairs and so on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Stead.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, reading the report, it looks fairly straightforward, and it's going to help certain people who want to have a drink at certain times. So I propose we go with the officer's recommendations, Chairman.
Is that seconded? All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. That is approved. Okay.
Thank you.
Can we now move on to item 7, 14 Collingwood Road, Hillingdon. And I believe also that the local councillor wishes to speak on this issue as well. Thank you. Mo, if you take this.
Thank you, Chairman. 14 Collingwood Road comprises a 2-storey end terrace dwelling situated on the west side of the road. The proposal is for the change of use of the property to a 4-bed house in multiple occupation. The application is the subject to 2 letters and a petition, and the details of the consultation replies are set out on pages 19 and 20 of the agenda. The main issue for members to consider are the principle of the use, the quality of accommodation provided, the impact on adjoining residents, and provision of parking. In terms of the principle of the use, this site falls within an area which the Council has applied an Article 4 direction restricting permitted development rights to convert properties to multiple occupation. Thus, the Council's interim policy HM1 supports a threshold approach and suggests that this should be at least 15% at neighbourhood level, which considers concentrations in a street length. Thus, within 100 metres of the application site, only one known HMO exists, and within the whole street of 165 houses, there are 3 others. Thus, the conversion of this property to an HMO would not breach the 15% threshold. However, paragraph 3.5 of the Council's supplementary planning guidance, houses in multiple occupation and other non-self-contained housing, states that terrace properties should be required to have a minimum gross floor area of 120 square metres before they can be considered for conversion. The application property, including the extensions that have been put on it, measures 94 square metres, which falls substantially below the minimum required and is considered in principle unsuitable for this form of accommodation. In terms of the quality of accommodation provided, the Council's supplementary planning guidance sets out recommended guidelines relating to the internal layout of such developments and the size of rooms to be provided. In this case, all of the rooms comply with or exceed the Council's minimum standard, and the property has adequate communal facilities, which also comply with the Council's minimum standards. The SPG also recommends that a minimum 15 metres of private usable amenity space is provided per habitable room. Thus 90 square metres of amenity space should be provided. With a usable garden area of over 250 square metres, development complies with this standard. No external alterations to the building are proposed. However, the internal layout shows that the communal kitchen adjoins the attached property and would share a party wall with number 16, and this could impact unduly on the adjoining occupiers in terms of noise and disturbance. Furthermore, there is the potential for 8 unrelated individuals to live within the property, given the size and separation of rooms available, and it's considered that this number of residents will be substantially more than if a large family were to occupy the dwelling. Therefore, the impact on neighbours in terms of vehicle movements of residents at all times of the day and night, and consequently noise and disturbance, would be greater than could reasonably expected if the property were occupied by a family. In terms of the parking, the Council's adopted SVG requires the provision of 1 space per 2 bedrooms. Submitted plans indicate that the average width of the frontage is some 7.5 metres, which is only wide enough to accommodate safely 2 vehicles and still allow for pedestrian access. The scheme therefore proposes inadequate off-street parking provision. Conclusion, the principle of the use is considered unacceptable. The proposal does not provide an acceptable living environment for its occupants. The impact on adjoining occupiers is unacceptable, and the proposal cannot provide the required car parking. Accordingly, refusal is recommended. If I can just go through the plans. This shows the layout, and there are no external changes. Bedrooms, living room, kitchen, and it is unusual in that there's a vehicular access which goes in front of these particular set of properties, with the road being here, so it's an access that was created back in the 80s, I think. This is the actual property. Unfortunately, the photographs are a bit dark, but if I go back to the frontage, what you have in terms of the parking is there's a on-street parking area located here, then the footpath, then you get a grass verge and so on, and then the access to the properties, and then the front gardens of the properties. So to access the properties, if I go back to the OS maps, to access the actual vehicular access is this circular element here, which just serves these sort of 8 or 10 properties that front it, and then you have a communal parking area in here, and which was created due to parking stress on the highway. So parking is a particular consideration in this particular area. There are no external changes, so there's no impact on the visual impact, and the issues are parking and the impact on adjoining occupiers. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I understand we have a petition against this proposal. Mrs. Joyce Cannon, I think I can recognise. Would you like to take your seat? I'm sure you know the rules, but we'll just repeat them to be... yes, you can join you. You'll know the rules, so we'll just repeat them to make sure everybody's aware of it. 5 minutes to speak, 4 minutes on green, 1 minute on amber, and when you get to red, I'll have to stop you.
Right, thank you very much. Good evening,
Go
everybody. As you know, my name's Mrs. Joyce Cannon, and I typed out a letter, and it turned out to be a petition in opposition to this property being changed from C3 to C4. We note that the planning officer has recommended application for refusal for the numerous reasons and directions given. We agree. The bedrooms on the extension are exceptionally small. The amenity area, I wouldn't like the committee to be under any misconception, if that's the right word, that they have use of the whole garden, because they do not. There is a small fenced area where the people who have been residents for about 2 years now have not been allowed to use. They've got no community area for their friends. There's youth that gather out the street, and we have lots of antisocial behaviour. The noise between the properties is intolerable. I can't say it, intolerable. And we suffer a great deal of disturbance to our quiet enjoyment of our properties. Olga, who's the immediate neighbour next door, she cannot be here, but she has explained to Councillor Mills all the screaming and shouting. As I say, we would like to draw your attention to the petition submitted, which now include ongoing antisocial behaviour, the damage caused to our properties, the nuisance and disturbance, as I say, to the quiet enjoyment of our properties. Mr. Taylor's actually put in a letter, which I have here, and I'll quickly run through it in a minute, about the noise. I have suffered nearly £900 worth of damage. It is down as criminal damage. The insurers have assessed it, and my insurers are going to cover it. When I spoke to the person in the property, I asked about public liability, and I was told, oh, I'll set up a payment plan between yourself and the youth. Sorry, that's not good enough. Mr. Taylor's called the council on our behalf regarding bonfire smoke and the burning of commercial waste, but he was told it wasn't a health hazard, but it is, and it's unacceptable. I have lung cancer, and I've got breast cancer, and I've been put in a position, although I keep saying to the council there's problems, I've been put in a position where I've got confrontation, and I have to go round and knock on the door and say, could you stop this, please? You're sitting there watching these. So we've got disturbed sleep, where the youth have been knocking on the doors, not being allowed in the mornings. There was building works that went on, or some kind of works that went on in the house, and the youth were chucking the rubble out in the road, big lumps of rubble. The neighbour, Olga's, they went out and asked them to stop. None of that was cleared up at all. And there's been numerous complaints. We've called in the is it Safer Neighbourhood team? We've called in the antisocial behaviour, and we've put complaints through the different departments. And Councillor Richard Mills did notify Democratic Services last year that we had problems. The people on the corner just round by us, where all these youth have been going, etc., they've had to put cameras up on their property on the corner. We have an HMO opposite us, not 100 metres up the road, but actually opposite, across the road. where we've got parking problems with that. So, Mr. Taylor, right, he's just quickly highlighted broken beer bottles smashed on the patio, wine bottles, condoms thrown over his fence, food on the lawn, windmills smashed on his van, and police, that's what I forgot to mention, the police is at the address on many occasions. We've both got lots of us, and lots of others have got grandchildren. It disturbs the neighbours of us opposite and along. So, we oppose. I think that's all I need to say.
Are there any questions? Councillor Wallana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify, so your property is not adjacent to this HMO?
Oh, sorry?
Your property is not adjacent to this
I'm
HMO?
next door but one. I'm next door but one to this HMO. We've got a little access road in front of us, and everything that comes up or is outside, yes, it affects us. Noise travels through the buildings.
You mentioned that previously the damage was caused to your property.
Yes.
Can you please tell us how it happened?
It was a football. They've been playing. The youth have been playing football out the front. Now, there's the applicants made an application to change it from C3 to C4, house and multiple occupation. He's left it to a social care services. I think the committee has got the information. There's youth from 16 to 25 with all different types of needs, problems, where they've gone there to actually maybe turn their lives around. And I did say to the owner of the property, not the owner of the business, if it was one of mine, which I'm lucky they haven't got them problems, if it was one of mine, I'd be horrified that they wasn't getting the wraparound care what you say that you're giving. They boot the ball like they're on a football pitch, like there's no tomorrow. And they're going in and out on people's cars, caravans, in the gardens. And it was continuous. It's actually stopped now because them ones have gone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No further questions? Councillor Mills, would you like to elaborate on that?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I speak in support of the residents who submitted this petition with their objections to the application this evening. As you've heard and well aware, they've contacted me many times around this and have been looking forward to this date of this application coming before the committee. I think a number of things they've highlighted have been around antisocial behaviour, and whilst not material planning issues, they do show how this property is not suitable for how it's currently being operated. The paper shows that it's a retrospective application, so it's currently already being operated as an HMO, something it doesn't currently have permission for, and as has been evidenced by the petitioners, it highlights the problems that are being caused by this. Turning to some of the planning issues that have been highlighted by officers, I think the report points out that the layout of this property is not suitable for the occupants. It's far too intensive. There's too many rooms and too many people living in what is a potentially large family house. But as the officer said, there's scope to have 8 people living in here, which is obviously a lot greater than what a normal family would consist in a house of this size. Also, there's concerns around the lack of communal space inside the house. If we have 6 or potentially 8 different sets of people, it's not much of an area for them to be able to live separate lives within one property. Picking up again how harmful this has been on the amenity of the neighbours, you've heard from petitioners that this is already being experienced, not just theoretical of what may happen. In terms of noise and disturbance, it's not just that of people coming in and out of the property throughout the day, but as has been highlighted in the report, through party walls where the kitchen is so close. Kitchen is clearly a communal room in a shared property. The noise is going to travel a lot through into the next property, which is causing ongoing disturbances. I think one of the things I wanted to pick up on was that this being an application for an HMO highlights the importance of us bringing in the Article 4 directive within this area, which meaning that planning permission isn't automatically given for these sort of things. They have to come before the planning committee. I think throughout the report it shows that this application is unacceptable for what it's asking for. both in terms of the impact on those living within it and those living outside of it in terms of neighbouring properties. As you've heard, it's already causing problems. Clearly, it's not suitable for what it's being asked for here. So I request that you support the officer's recommendation and the request of the petitioners to refuse his application.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any questions to Councillor Wallana?
Thank you, Chairman. Did you say that this building is already in operation and it's in use before this application?
Yes, it's believed that this property is currently being lived in by maybe 6 or more adults, and the application suggests it's a retrospective application, suggesting that it's being used as an HMO currently without permission.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, we'll open it up for... Thank you, Councillor, thank you. Open it up for debate. Councillor Stead.
Thank you, Chairman. The petitioner mentioned something about the upper rooms are very small. Can the officer confirm that they are full and they are within limits, please?
Thank you, Chairman. The rooms are small. Unfortunately, the supplementary planning guidance sets out the sizes of rooms that are available or that are required, and the sizes of rooms that are proposed meet the standards that are set out in the supplementary planning guidance.
Thank you. Any further? Councillor Boss.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd certainly take the view that on our planning rules that there's certainly not enough amenity space for the number of people putting in, and I always take the view that these HMOs seem to have less amenity space starting off with compared with a normal family would be living there. Yeah? So there's a reduction in standard already, and then we have this additional issue that we cannot actually monitor some of the rooms. Some of the rooms can actually change views, and we would have difficulty in actually monitoring that. So I take the view that the officers have made the correct recommendation.
Councillor Wallana.
Thank you, Chairman. After listening to the petitioner and of the councillor, I think, and having read the report, I'm very happy to second to refuse.
Can I take it that you were proposing that we... Thank you, and seconded by Councillor Wallana. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Can we move on to item 8, 9 Princess Park Parade? Meg, if you will start us off.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a reverse of the previous application in that it's a change from a house in multiple occupation to a single dwelling. And this has come about as a result of lengthy enforcement action, which has resulted, or the property was being used as an unauthorised HMO. We've served enforcement notices, we've been to court, and we've now reached the position of having an application for its reinstatement to a dwelling which meets the standards that are required, and therefore we've recommended it for approval. If I can just go through the plans. You can see it was split into a number of bedrooms. There are, again, no external changes proposed internally. They just changed some of the bedrooms into living areas and so on. So it then becomes a single family dwelling, which is what the enforcement notice requires it to be. As you can see at the moment, all the rooms are numbered. It's difficult to see, but all of the rooms are numbered. They have internal facilities, which means that they can be used in HMO use, and we want all those fittings removed and reinstated as a single dwelling, which is what the application is for, and we recommend it for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
I've got a question as to how long will it take from now, if whatever decision, if we approved this, how long would it take them to actually do the work, and when would they start? Is there a time limit on it?
but the time limit is set by the enforcement, so we could tomorrow ask for a date for a court appearance, and they would then need to either appear in court or comply with the enforcement notice, comply with the planning permission. So in terms of getting a move on, what we would need to do is to get legal to give them a push by asking for court dates, and therefore pushing them to comply with the planning permission and enforcement notice.
I was just looking across as our legal officer, who was giving me that look of not being 100% sure. So may I request delegated authority to do a further check through our legal team before we actually issue an approval, and through that delegated authority, if we need to impose a time limit of what would normally be in such circumstances quite a short one, that I've delegated authority to do so. I don't want to let members approve this with a 3-year time limit.
No.
If the point Meg said, legal actually say, well, that's not correct. As long as members are happy to delegate that to me, I will, in conjunction with the legal officer after the meeting, ensure that we check that the right approach is taken as regards the time limit. That's condition 1.
I mean, I am happy with that. I think it's taken a very long time to get it to the to enforcement notice time, and to reach a situation where they've begun to take notice of the enforcement notice. So we certainly don't want this to go on any longer. So I certainly would be quite happy that the sooner we can move on that, the better. So with that rider inserted, we're saying that this is left to the director of the manager of planning.
So you delegate to the head of planning enforcement to check with the legal team the final wording of condition 1.
I will be happy with that. Is that in agreement? Oh, are you saying that you're in agreement? Or?
I was just saying I was in agreement, Chairman.
Thank you. Let's do it properly. All in favour of that as a decision. Thank you. Item 9, Brunel University.
Thanks, Chairman. Very minor works within the Brunel site. The application building is this, and what they want to do, as you can see, the site is all in the green belt at the moment, and it's this element here, this compound area here, which they want to amend. At the moment it looks like that, and its amendment would involve new compound area, new building, and its appearance changes very little, and it has no impact. It's to the side, it's this area here, so it's to the side. There are no windows in the halls of residence which would be impacted upon, so we're recommending it for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, we've had lots of applications on Brunel University over the years, and we've treated most of them as infills. So I've got no problem with this one going forward to go with the officer's recommendations, Chairman.
John.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question. What the problem is, they need a computer centre for a temporary period of time. We're actually building this in quite an unusual place. I think it's just, why are we not conditioning this to have a life expectancy? Because in effect, it is a temporary building to house the computing system. At some point, when the new computing centre is built, it will no longer have this function needed.
Meg.
The application was requested as a full application. There was no indication that they wanted it for a temporary period, so we've had to consider it as a full application for a permanent building, which is how we've considered it.
One point I would take to members is it actually causing any harm? Because if we are going to effectively, if the committee were to unravel what the applicant is seeking consent for, there needs to be a reason for imposing a temporary timescale, and if it's not actually causing any harm, then I'm not sure why there'd be a justification. Because theoretically, members could impose a planning condition with a temporary time period, but the applicant hasn't sought it, and we need quite a strong reason to do so, and I'm not sure at this location what the justification might be to deviate from what they sought planning permission for.
Yeah, thank you, James. Is it the fact that if it's very temporary, what are they going to use the building for? But whatever they want to do, surely they would have to put another planning application in order to use the building for something else.
My point is that I'm just, as it's in Greenbelt, it's technically, as I understand it, is in Greenbelt. We're just putting another building in there with no restrictions or whatsoever, and it could be that it just stays there forever. But the need is for a temporary I mean, okay, I just raised it as an issue because it struck me as it's in Greenbelt, we just carte blanche saying yes.
I think just sort of remembering we did have an application not long ago on the Brunel site where we did approve a building for a temporary period, and they then came back and asked for it to be a permanent because the building was in essence a permanent building. They did need it for a period of time for computer facilities as well at that time. But they had planned it to be a permanent building, and it came back to committee, and committee then approved the permanent retention of that building. So it's likely that they will have another use which is part of the Brunel University requirements. So that is probably why the building has been requested as a full application and a permanent building.
Do we not also accept that, yes, it is on Greenbelt, but it's not exactly on open Greenbelt. It's in the middle of it's in a university, and these changes take place whilst the general public are not aware of it, and it really isn't defined as destruction of the Greenbelt. Yeah,
it is a site which is known as a major developed site within the Greenbelt, so you can have small infilling within that, and this is well within the central part of the site. The Greenbelt areas that are open areas are quite well removed from this site, and it has no real impact on the openness of the Greenbelt or its visual impact.
Okay, I mean, nevertheless, I think it's interesting that you've raised that point that you believe you have further information. However, I think we can only act on what Brunel have said they want to do with it and respond in that way. Can I just bring in Councillor Wallana, then you can come back to me.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. As it is not causing any harm, I'm happy to second to approve the application. I have no problem.
We haven't had it proposed yet. Councillor Moores.
No, I'm not.
Oh, did you? Sorry.
I'm not proposing that my consideration is that we refuse this, but I have noticed on the Brunel site there's gradually accumulation of more and more, which is supposed to be an open site, and that's just a point of principle I'm raising this on. I'm quite happy to go ahead supporting this, but I'm putting it to planners' attention on this site. This is happening.
I think that's duly noted. Councillor Stead, did you propose, did you?
I did propose.
Right, and Councillor Wallana, you've seconded. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Item 10, 148 Windsor Avenue.
Thank you, Chairman. This is an application for an outbuilding for use as a gym. It is a small building in comparison to a number of others. It's 27 square metres. It does have a shower room, but no other facilities are located within it. And we are recommending approval subject to conditions, particularly condition 5, which restricts its use and allows us, hopefully, some control over its occupation. With that, if I can just go to the plans and photographs. That's the site. It has a very long garden. You'll note that there are a number of outbuildings in the rear of most of the surrounding buildings. That's it there. It has a shower room, but otherwise it's open plan. That's the design of it. And if I can just go directly to the rear, that's the garage associated with it. You'll see that there's a similar building on the adjoining site here. So we're recommending approval with the conditions. Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to see the condition is there that says it can only be used for as a gymnasium. It cannot be used for kitchens, living rooms, bedrooms, and what have you. But at the back of my mind, at the back of all our minds, I think, is we're fearful of the beds in sheds scenario. However, that doesn't mean to say you can't build a gym, and we have somewhere trust has to take place. But we've also got to watch what's happening, I think. Any further comments? Councillor Stead?
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, when we see this sort of thing, there's always that little suspicion at the back of your mind what they're going to actually do. But until they do anything other than what they've asked for, then there's not really a lot we can do. And I would support the officer's recommendations, Chairman.
Is that seconded? Seconded by Mulkashid. All in favour? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will note from the report and the history that there have been a number of renewals of the temporary permission. The original permission was granted on the basis that there was a plan for a permanent building to house these school children. Unfortunately, there have been funding issues in relation to the permanent building, and they've had to continue renewing this. This is an application for a renewal up to the 30th of September 2019. Not 19, but to 2020. We are recommending it, if I can inform members, that the school is not taking any more pupils which would occupy these temporary buildings. Therefore, what they are asking for is time to allow the existing pupils to finish off their education in these premises and then move on to secondary school. Once that has happened, then there would be no need for these buildings and they will be removed. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, personally, I don't see we've got any choice. If we don't do it, then the children have got nowhere to be educated, and at least it is going to stop when these children move on to the next school. So, can somebody move it?
I move officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Chapman. Yeah, seconded. All in favour? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's probably best if I just go directly to the plans and photographs. This site is located in an area of special local character. It is a interesting designer building, quite attractive building. That's it there at the moment, and it has these single-storey, if I can go to the front elevation, the single-storey bay windows, some interesting and attractive balconies, and what's being proposed is these three-storey elements to the front, which are in place of the bay windows, which end in a flat roof, as you can see here, and have no real bearing on the design of the rest of the property. And then to the rear, these very large dormer windows and these inset windows, which again take away from the character of the property. If I can just go to the photographs, you'll see that it is these quite interesting balconies. The rear is not as interesting as the front, and that's the front, and these are the areas, the bay windows upon which they're proposing the three-storey tower element entrance areas, and it's not considered to be in character. It is considered to be unacceptable. The proposal is for a flat an additional flat in the roof, and there are parking issues in this area, and they've not provided any evidence of additional parking to go with the additional flat, so we're recommending refusal on that basis as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Well, I declared an interest that it was in my ward. Can I just say it is totally out of character with the surrounding houses. This looks like it was built around 1930. It will be over dominant. However, I'm not living there, but it will damage the look of the area. Any further comments? Ken?
Thank you, Chairman. The balcony areas on the building itself, is there any overlooking of any adjacent buildings at all, please?
No, I mean the balcony areas that are existing are to the front. To the rear, they're sufficient distances from the adjoining properties not to result in overlooking. That would recommend refusal on that basis.
Councillor Wallana.
Thank you, Chairman. How many more parking spaces are required?
For a one-bedroom flat would require one additional space, but there is a parking problem in the area, as you can see from it is a management area. From the photographs, you'll see that it's quite heavily parked on the roads at the moment. So, and this was taken during the daytime. In the evenings, it will be worse.
Councillor Money.
It seems like a big development for just a one-bedroom flat. Is this normal? Is this what one would do?
Yeah, I mean it's the sort of biggest elements are the front entrance areas which they're proposing, and they need those because they can't get through otherwise to the top floor, and that's the reason why. Otherwise, the dormers and so on are fairly normal sort of applications that we get. It's the front three-storey elements which are unusual.
Councillor Stead.
Thank you, Chairman. It is a refusal anyway, and I propose we go with the officer's recommendations.
Is that seconded? Councillor Money seconded. All in favour? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Members may recall a couple of committees ago we had an application for a very similar development on the adjoining site, two detached buildings for a warehouse use, and that was approved subject to a Section 106 agreement relating to highway works at the junction of Wallingford Road and Cowley Road. And the issue with this particular application again is that junction. It is a fairly difficult junction to access for large vehicles, and the money that we're seeking will improve that junction, will allow larger vehicles to access this site. The other issue that members raised at that time was the use of Cowley Road at night, and we hopefully will have dealt with that by way of the condition restricting the use or the times that the use can operate by condition number. I can get to it. Condition number 8. However, I do have a request for an additional condition because that allows condition 8 allows deliveries to be made outside of those hours, and we would want to restrict deliveries and vehicle movements associated with those deliveries as well. So I'd request that we have an additional condition restricting deliveries as well, and servicing as well to the times that are set out in condition 8. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Morse.
Thank you, Chairman. I do have a few questions. On this site, do we know if the tanks leak, which way the fluid might flow? Because we got the canal, and on page 103, you talk about a dwarf concrete wall, which apparently is slightly protective. I mean, should we be considering conditioning that, or which way would if we have a leak, we don't want the fuel going into the canal. I don't completely know whether this is flat or what. This is my line of questioning.
Have we got any info on
We are proposing a drainage condition, which is what so condition 5 would cover that issue. Yeah, that's what that's a request from our floodwater and management officer. So we are requesting, and that is covered by condition 5, which requires them to provide drainage system and sustainable water management measures to make sure that that's covered.
It's part B of that condition that addresses your concern, because there's a lot of text, but I can tell you it's part B.
Any further comments?
Chair, I move officer's recommendation.
Thank you, Mo. Lana?
Thank you, Margaret. Second.
All those in favour? Carried unanimously.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Again, the site is before you because the site is, as you can see, in the green belt. It does adjoin a number of listed buildings here, but this building in itself is not what you might call listable or any form of attractiveness to it. As you can see, it is proposed to make fairly minor amendments to the appearance, to the frontage. As you can see, the top element is the existing, and what's proposed is below it. It has very little impact on the green belt, and as you sort of infilling this canopy area and providing a new signage there is basically what they're doing. And whilst it is in the green belt, it's well within the school compound site. It is surrounded by car parking, and therefore it has very little impact on the green belt or the visual impact. Thank you, Chairman.
Do we know what they're putting in the infill?
Sorry, it's the sort of main entrance area to the school, so they're increasing the size of the entrance area.
Thank you. Councillor Wallana?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to move with the officer's recommendations to approve this application. I have no objection.
Is that seconded? Councillor Kashid, all those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. That brings us to the end of part 1, and we say goodbye to those watching on the Hillingdon YouTube.